Welcome back to BetterSociety.info. This is our 25th video in our regular series. And a while back in an earlier video, I asked you to make a list. The list was going to involve what you would do if you were in a ruling situation, if you were a really rich person, and all your relatives and friends were rich people, but that richness was based upon the work of a whole lot more people who are kept in their place. That is to say that in many cases, some nations, our nation in fact, there was slavery. There's other types of involuntary servitude, such as being a villein or being a serf. So how does that work? I mean, Plato had what he considered to be his ideal government, and it was set up on the basis of the smartest people somehow being the rulers, and then there would be some military police type people who were the enforcers, and then everybody else would be happy to just do all the work and keep the other people in food and clothing and housing in such a way that it was a whole lot better than what the workers had. But of course that sort of thing really doesn't work because most people want to be free. So how do you keep people down? How do you keep a large percentage of your population in a state of servitude, either regular slavery or being a serf or villein or something like that? And of course, in the history of the world, the last 10,000 years or so, that arrangement has been the arrangement in a lot of nations, and it is still the arrangement in a lot of nations today. So how did that happen? I mean, in the United States we had a civil war, and the North won the battle on the battlefield, and eventually, though, they didn't win the peace. So how did that happen? Now, I've already said that there's not a lot of research and scholarship being directed toward understanding that. If you go to a library, university library, there's going to be a lot of books on the Civil War, and then there might be a few books on the Reformation era, but then all the books will start being about the movement to the west, the building of the Transcontinental Railroad, the development of industrialization in the north. There's not very much information, not very much research done on what happened in the Reconstruction era. And eventually what did happen, though, is that the South won. That the Northerners, the industrial people who had a lot of control of the government, the federal government and the state governments, gave up on enforcing a nation having first-class citizens. And the United States Supreme Court kind of gutted the 13th, the 14th, and the 15th Amendment, and people couldn't vote. Black people, at least, couldn't vote in the South. Same was true of other people of other races, even in other parts of the country. And there was not equal protection. The Supreme Court ruled in several cases in the 1880s, 90s that said that, well, the Bill of Rights only applies to the federal government, and it doesn't apply to the states. So, like Plessy versus Ferguson is an example where the concept of separate but equal was established. So, we passed 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendment into the Constitution, but they were not enforced. And only in recent years, in my lifetime, has our United States Supreme Court started to incorporate the 14th Amendment into the Constitution and apply it to the various different states. The same thing is true of the 13th and the 15th Amendment. So how did that happen? And that would seem to be something we would want to know, because we certainly don't want it to happen again. We need the talent and capability and the intellect of all of our people in order to continue to keep our nation and the world strong. So, not a lot of scholarship, but we need to understand that better. And there ought to be scholarship. So, in this video, and I guess based upon the time factor here, it's going to be the next video too, I'm going to talk about the various different factors that applied to this backsliding. And the first one, of course, was economics, that the North needed the raw materials that came out of the South in order for its industry to function. I mean, if you're going to have a textile industry and you're going to make a lot of clothing and cloth and so on, then you need cotton. And the old Southern oligarchy that had been in control of the economy of the South with the old system of slavery, they couldn't have the old system, but so they came up with a new way of doing it, and keeping black people in a condition of servitude, and that continued up through my lifetime. So it got to be a matter of economics, that the oligarchy of the South, with the involvement of what we call the Ku Klux Klan, just caused so much terrorism in the South, and that limited the economy of both the North and the South. And so the economics of the situation indicated that, well, okay, if we're going to have an industrial America, we need those raw supplies from the South. And so eventually the North gave in to the South and allowed them to continue with their oligarchy system of government and economy. And that kept most of the people very poor in the South. There was some progress made in that people from the South, if they could get away from their, they weren't owners anymore, but they were certainly people in the Southern oligarchy who had ways of keeping them working for them. And yeah, a lot of people did go to the North, migrated to the North, but the old system of involuntary servitude in the South continued. And so the economics was a major factor. The North needed the produce of the South, and they eventually gave up on their ideals of having a first-class society throughout the United States, and gave in to the South and allowed them to return something to their old ways. So we're going to talk about some of that again in the next video. I think I'm probably out of time now, so I'll talk to you about that later.